where superheroes meet high fashion. In conjunction with the Red 5 Network, we're proud to present comics and cosmetics.
Kapla, nerdlings. Pahi woo. Tangan yo ye tangan pan. Wolf. Translation. Hey nerdlings, today we're diving in to Worf. What is up, nerdlings, and welcome back to my channel! Alright, good job. If you're new, welcome. I'm Danny Sanssouci, licensed cosmetologist and registered super nerd, and this is Comics and Cosmetics, the channel where I talk about whatever nerdy topic I've been obsessing about that week while doing my makeup at the same time. Well, you watch. Again, if you're new, make sure to smash that like button. Just cream that subscribe button with your bat left and hit the bell. That way you get notified whenever I'm back with another one of these magnificent videos. We're going to go ahead and keep on pushing forward with another one of my brother's favorite characters. And this week, as I told you from the future, and as you can tell by my forehead ridges, this week we're talking about Worf. Now, if you didn't know already, Comics and Cosmetics now has a Patreon. Hooray! So if you want to help support the channel and make sure I'm still here doing this stuff, if you enjoy it, then make sure you go to patreon.com/comicsandcosmetics. There's 3 different tiers to choose from. You get extra content, tutorials. There's even a tutorial up on how I created this little gem up here and how I fabricated my Klingon teeth. That's right. So if you're interested in that, please check out our Patreon and help continue to support the channel. Without any further ado, though, let's dive right into Worf, shall we? So like most nerdy kids in the 80s, my brother and I watched a lot of Star Trek The Next Generation. It came out in 1986. Patrick Stewart starred as Jean-Luc Picard. But also, we had Michael Dorn as Commander Worf. He started off as a bridge officer in command, so he wore the red uniform. But after Lieutenant Tasha Yar passed away, who was head of security, he switched over to security. He became head of security. Worf is a Klingon. He was born on the Klingon homeworld of Kronos in, December 9th of 2340 to Moog, one of the patriarchs of one of the great houses of the Klingon Empire. When Worf was 5, His father moved his mother, and his kind of nursemaid nanny, Kaylest, to the Kittimer colony, a Klingon outpost. And his youngest son, who was only a year old, he left with one of his comrades, Lore. They figured, we're not going to be gone long, we're not going to stay there long, and he's a baby, so we'll be back. Worf also had a pet targ. Scary little things, but Klingons love them as pets. And, they eat them too, so there's that. Well, they move there, and, Worf goes on a hunting trip with his father, Moog, but he's still very young. He's not reached the age of inclusion yet, which is a rite of passage for Klingon pubescent boys. He was not able to hold a batleth yet, so he wasn't able to really defend himself when this beast came and attacked him. And this left him scarred for his whole life. Like, he has a scar and he remembered it, so he carries that with him. When Worf was 6 in 2346, the Romulans and the Klingons barely enjoyed a very, very, very tenuous peace. The Romulans, who are also very warlike species like the Klingons, were the Klingons' just arch nemesis. And at this time, they had reached kind of an agreement. Well, don't hold your breath. The leader of House Duras, someone that really didn't like Moog, and the feeling was pretty much mutual, had conspired with the Romulans and just totally 100% betrayed the Klingon Empire. Duras used his security code to alert the Romulans and give them the access codes to lower the shields to the Kittimer colony. And what resulted was the Romulans decimating the Kittimer outpost. They killed over 4,000 Klingon, and that included Worf's parents. A Federation vessel, a Starfleet vessel to be exact, answered their distress call. It was the Intrepid. And on the Intrepid was a young chief petty officer named Sergei Reshenko. And he was actually down on the surface trying to find survivors. And there, under a pile of rubble, he discovers 6-year-old Worf. He then took Worf back with him to his home, where his wife Helena and son Nikolai were. And he raised Worf alongside his son, Nikolai, like Worf was his own son. Now, of course, at this time on Galt, where the Reshenkos lived, Worf was the only Klingon. The only Klingon child. He was it. So he had a lot of issues fitting in. When he was 7, he got into a fight with 5 teenage boys and whooped the shit out of all of them because he felt like they were being disrespectful. They probably were. Teenagers are the worst. I've been saying that for years. Now, just fitting in with kids his own age on the planet wasn't really the only issue that the Reshenkos ran into with Worf. In fact, Worf wouldn't even eat human food. He wouldn't eat any of it. He wanted gach, heart of targ, blood pie. So Helena, the awesome woman that she was, learned how to make runic blood pie. There are many different types of blood pie, FYI. When Worf was 13, he decided to join the soccer team. And he was really good at it, like too good. He was getting really into it. Unfortunately, he got a little too into it, and as a boy from the opposing team approached him on the field, Worf kind of headbutted him. Unfortunately, this killed the boy. He suffered severe brain trauma and died. This haunted Worf for the rest of his life. You know, Worf struggled to fit in. He struggled to mash that Klingon heart of his in this human environment, this human culture. Klingons are very, very warlike. And they're much more strong and resilient and all of that than humans are. Up until this point, Worf pretty much celebrated that about himself. He's like, yeah, I know. I'm so bad. I'm so strong. But when that boy died, it resonated with Worf that he was going to have to start holding himself back. Kind of like, you know, when Superman is shaking hands with somebody, he's got to hold back. This changed Worf on a fundamental level. He went from happy-go-lucky kid to having to practice an unbelievable amount of self-restraint 24/7. Now we've got some Klingon eyebrows, baby. We're gonna let that dry. Yes, girl. Yes. I'm looking so Klingon. I always wanted to be Klingon. I'm so happy. My brother would be freaking out right now. When Worf and his brother Nikolai, his adopted brother, became of age, they both put in their applications for Starfleet Academy. And they both got in. Yay! However, Worf's the only one who stuck around. Nikolai eventually left. But Worf was determined, as was his personality. He was the very first Klingon in Starfleet Academy. And so, of course, after doing so well, he was given pretty sweet posting. He was assigned to the Starship Enterprise under the command of one Jean-Luc Picard. At this point in Worf's life, it was very important to him to fit in with his new people. And you can tell by the way he drinks prune juice. He's very reserved, very controlled. He even cut and straightened his Klingon locks, his glorious Klingon locks, to fit in more with his new compatriots. Eventually, Worf would warm up more to his Starfleet companions and see them as family, and he became more comfortable with his Klingon self. After being on the Enterprise for a couple of years, there was a kind of an exchange program between the Klingon Empire and Starfleet. So at one point, Riker goes and spends time on a Klingon ship, and now it was time for the Enterprise to get a Klingon on their ship. In comes Commander Kurn, and he's a hard ass. He's like hard on everybody. And then he starts like screwing with Worf, picking on him because he's living with humans and, drinking prune juice, stuff like that. Well, come to find out, Kurn was his brother. He was just wanting to make sure he was still Klingon enough to do what needed to be done. Because the Klingon Empire had marked his father Moog as a traitor. When we all know that ain't true. So Moog and Kern go to Kronos together, and they find the truth that it was Duras's father. It was Duras that had conspired with the Romulans, not Moog. But because of the position the Duras family has in the Empire, they couldn't let it get out. It would be civil war. And the Klingons are all about honor and reputation. And, you know, if your family did something bad, then, or someone in your family did something bad, you're going to have to answer for it. Well, Worf ended up taking discommodation from the Klingon Empire and refused to allow his brother to let anyone know that they were brothers so that he could stay as a member of the Klingon Empire. But Worf was now discommoded. He was no longer considered a Klingon by Klingons. It was so sad. He also finds out that a woman he mated with, who was also half human, had a child. Worf had a son named Alexander. Well, unfortunately, she dies, and now Worf is a single father. Well, what's he gonna do? He's trotting around the universe. He can't take a 3-year-old with him. So he sent Alexander home with his parents. I mean, they did such a good job with him. The Rashenkos could handle little Alexander as well. Well, they couldn't. And so Alexander joined Worf. Now I know what you're thinking. Okay? Worf seems like a lonely guy. You know, he's the only Klingon in this starship. He's a man of two worlds, never truly fitting 100% in one or the other. So, what's a Klingon to do? Well, for a time, he dated Deanna Troi. He surely did. And a lot of people were really weirded out by that because, you know, her and Riker were totally a thing. And they ended up getting married and stuff. But I liked the Worf Deanna thing. I really did. I thought it was cool. And I would have been real interested to see a Klingon, a half Klingon, half Beta Z. Well, technically it would have been, the baby would have been half Klingon, a quarter Beta Z, and a quarter human. And I would have been kind of interested to see what that had been like, because I think it would be really handy for a warrior to have empathic or telepathic abilities. Am I wrong? No, I'm not wrong. I'm not. And I guess this is sort of what this character I'm creating is based off of, since this is legit my very first ever full-on cosplay. I thought about it before, and I'd created this half Klingon, half Beta Z character because I thought that'd be really cool. So, thank you. I totally shipped Deanna and Worf. And if you didn't think Worf was sexy, you have a problem. Now, Worf didn't stay on the Enterprise for his entire career. Oh no. He eventually settled down for a nice, cushy life on a space station. Little known place called Deep Space Nine. Am I right? Yeah, that's my favorite Trek show. And at this point, he had returned back to command. So he's back in his sexy red uniform. It was at this point, while stationed on Deep Space Nine, that Worf meets the love of his life and future wife. And she would challenge him in so many ways. Jadzia Dax was a Trill. She was a Trill. And she had a symbiote living inside of her that had lived 7 other lifetimes. So she was very wise. However, she was also all about having a good time. Something that Worf really wasn't about at all. Okay? He just wasn't. He was so used to holding himself back that going out and partying and stuff with his girlfriend just wasn't on his list of things to do. I know someone else like that. Where did that come from? Who does that remind me of? Around this time, a jerk named Gowron becomes High Chancellor of the Klingon Empire. And he hates Worf. Worf hates him. That's okay. Worf ends up killing him. But Worf gets his family honor back and joins the House of Martok. And once this is done, he decides that him and Jadzia need to get hitched. And she's like, yeah. And after a very, very, very bumpy, how shall I put it? Introduction testing process. She basically fails it, but Martok's wife is kind of hard-nosed, but then again, I mean, she's in charge of making sure only the worthiest people are joined to her house. Because if you screw up, your family is responsible for you. You could have your whole family killed if the Klingon Empire sees you as a traitor or just bad for the Empire. But they end up getting married on Deep Space Nine, and it was a friggin' awesome episode. It was an awesome ceremony. If for some weird reason I end up getting married again, I totally want a Klingon ceremony, because nobody can stand against the beating of two Klingon hearts. Not even me. Unfortunately, their marriage is short-lived. And Worf loses his wife, Jadzia. She's killed by Gul Dukat while she's praying to the prophets for them to have a child. It's so sad. Now, despite his many personal tragedies, he's very close with his son, Alexander, who did not do very well on Klingon ships. God love Alexander. Just so cute, but kind of a weenie Klingon. But he also commanded this little ship, called the Defiant. This is actually my brother's Christmas ornament, and when you plug it into the lights, it blinks. I love it very much. But as you can see, the boy loved him some Worf. Worf is kind. And he represents the best and the greatest of the Klingon culture. Klingons are warrior poets. They have these huge warm hearts. They love art. They love opera. Worf loves Klingon operas. In fact, one time, Jadzia threatened to she didn't threaten, she took his Klingon operas because Worf Worf was going to go help Garrick find what turned out to be his father in the Gamma Quadrant, and he hadn't told Jadzia yet. She found out secondhand, and she's pissed about it. So she said, I'm taking your Klingon opera. And he was like, the hell you are. You lose things. And she's like, yeah, I do. So guess you better come back. She's smart. So he loves poetry. He loves art. He loves love. Worf is a lover. But he is a fighter too. He is a warrior at heart. He is absolutely everything I am attracted to in a man. I blame Star Trek for my taste in men. Can you blame me though? He's so awesome. And you'll notice later in his life, once he became more comfortable in his surroundings, and he realized, these aren't teenagers. They're not going to pick on you anymore for your hair. He grew his hair back out in its natural, which I'm very grateful for because it's beautiful. I want Worf's hair. Oh, and the piece de resistance. Kapla. Human females are so repulsive. Well, there you have it, nerdlings. That's all I have on Worf today and my very first cosplay, my Klingon look. Follow us on all the socials at Comics and Cosmetics. And you can follow us on Twitter at this right here. Definitely follow us on Twitter so that you can keep up to date on everything that's going on with Comics and Cosmetics. I do occasionally show up on other podcasts, so you might want to check that out. Hashtag we are Red5. Oh yeah, Dave got me a new stick. Isn't that great? So hashtag Red5 family. Check out the Red5. Definitely. Right, chow. Definitely follow us on Patreon. Help support the channel. Go to patreon.com/comicsandcosmetics for tutorials on how I created the prosthetics and applied them. Behind the scenes, extra content, you know the drill. And hopefully soon we are gonna have some merch up in y'all. So guys, I hope you had a good time. I had a good time. Worf was my brother's favorite Star Trek character, him and Data, I do have to say. And it really makes me feel good to be able to share that kind of stuff with you because I sure do miss him. And I think he would absolutely love this, like get a huge kick out of it. So, once again, nerdlings, thank you so much for stopping by. Have an awesome and wizard day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.